before the T-Rex, before the Brachiosaurus, before any dinosaur you have ever heard of. There was a world recovering from the greatest catastrophe in the history of life on Earth. And from the ashes of that catastrophe, something new was learning to walk. 230 million years ago, in what is now Argentina, the very first dinosaurs appeared. They were nothing like what would come later. They were small, fast, bipedal. Some were no bigger than a large dog, but they had something the other creatures around them did not have, an advantage so subtle it took millions of years to matter, and then it changed everything. This is the Triassic period, the world before the world you know. Look at this landscape. There are no forests like the ones you know, no lush green canopies, no broadleaf trees providing shade. The air is thick with heat. The ground is cracked red earth extending to the horizon in every direction. This is Pangaea, one single supercontinent. Every landmass on Earth joined together into a single C-shaped continent surrounded by one vast ocean. The interior of Pangaea was brutal. Summers were extreme. Winters were cold. Rainfall was rare, except near the coasts, and the planet had just survived something almost unimaginable. The Triassic began 252 million years ago, but it did not begin in triumph. It began in silence. 90 to 96% of all species on Earth had just been wiped out. Scientists call it the Permian-Triassic extinction event. Most people have heard of the asteroid that killed the dinosaurs, but the Great Dying was far worse. The oceans lost almost everything. The land was barely alive. The causes are still debated. Massive volcanic eruptions in what is now Siberia. Dramatic changes in ocean chemistry. A world that became briefly uninhabitable for most of its residents. For millions of years after, the world was dominated by one creature that had somehow survived. Lystrosaurus, a stocky herbivore about the size of a pig. Scientists have called it the Noah of the Permian-Triassic boundary. Its fossils appear in early Triassic rock on every continent: Antarctica, Africa, Asia. It was everywhere because almost nothing else was. For a while, Lystrosaurus was almost the only large land vertebrate on Earth. Imagine that, walking through a landscape where almost every large animal is the same species. The world it walked through was alien in its emptiness. The plants that survived were survivors by definition. Conifers with needle-like leaves adapted to drought and heat. Cycads with their palm-like appearance that has barely changed in 250 million years. Ferns in the wetter areas near the coasts, nothing resembling the lush forests of the Jurassic and Cretaceous that would come later. And into this recovering, hostile, half-empty world, life began to rebuild, slowly, generation by generation. The first creatures to diversify significantly were the archosaurs, a broad group of reptiles that would eventually split into two remarkable lineages. One lineage would become the crocodilians, still with us today. The other would become the dinosaurs. For millions of years in the early and middle Triassic, these archosaurs competed with another group called therapsids. The therapsids are important because from them would eventually come the mammals, eventually come us. In the early Triassic, it was not obvious which group would dominate. The therapsids were diverse and widespread. Some were already showing early signs of the warm-blooded physiology that would define mammals. But in the middle Triassic, the balance shifted. The Rauisuchians emerged as the apex predators. They were enormous, Some reached 6 meters in length. They walked upright, which was unusual for reptiles at the time. They had powerful jaws and robust bodies. Prestosuchus chiniquensis, discovered in Brazil, was one of the most formidable predators the Triassic ever produced. These animals completely dominated the large predator niche, and yet they would be entirely gone by the end of the Triassic, because something else was coming. The first true dinosaurs appeared approximately 230 to 240 million years ago, in the late Triassic. The oldest dinosaur candidate is Nyasasaurus, found in Tanzania, dating to around 243 million years ago, but the first clearly confirmed dinosaurs come from South America, from what is now the Ishigualasto Formation in Argentina. This red-rocked badland landscape in the foothills of the Andes was 230 million years ago a floodplain ecosystem, hot, seasonal, crossed by rivers that flooded during the monsoon and dried almost completely. Early dinosaurs may have already been developing the air sac system that their descendants, the birds, still use today. In modern birds, air sacs allow air to flow through the lungs in one direction continuously, rather than in and out like mammal lungs. It is dramatically more efficient at extracting oxygen. In the hot, possibly low oxygen atmosphere of the Triassic, this would have been an enormous advantage. The dinosaurs could stay active in heat and thin air that exhausted their competitors. For tens of millions of years, the first dinosaurs were not dominant. They coexisted with the Rauisuchians. They stayed out of the way of the large predators. They occupied ecological niches that the bigger animals ignored. Fast, small, efficient, adaptable. They were not winning, they were just surviving. And survival, over enough time, is its own kind of victory. Then, 201 million years ago, everything changed again. At the end of the Triassic, another mass extinction event struck. The Triassic-Jurassic extinction. Massive volcanic eruptions in what is now the Central Atlantic Ocean released enormous quantities of carbon dioxide. The climate shifted rapidly. Sea levels changed. Many ecosystems collapsed. The Rauisuchians disappeared. Most of the large crurotarsal archosaurs that had dominated for so long were gone. Many of the therapsids disappeared, setting back the mammal lineage for 65 million years. And the dinosaurs somehow survived. What had been a minor group, living in the shadows of the dominant creatures, became the inheritors of the world. The Jurassic would begin with dinosaurs as the dominant land vertebrates for the first time, and they would remain dominant for the next 135 million years. But that moment of inheritance, that pivot point of evolutionary history, happened here, in the Triassic, in the heat and dust of Pangaea, in the shadow of the creatures that seem to own the world. Evolution does not plan. It does not know what it is doing. It simply keeps what works and discards what does not. And in the Triassic, what worked was upright posture and efficient breathing. Generation by generation, the dinosaur lineage accumulated these advantages without knowing what they were accumulating. The T-Rex you know, the Brachiosaurus, the Triceratops, the Velociraptors. Every dinosaur that ever walked this earth traces its origin to a small, fast creature running through the dry heat of Pangaea 230 million years ago, in a world that was nothing like the one they would eventually create. The story of life on Earth is not the story of the strong replacing the weak. It is the story of the adaptable outlasting the dominant. And the Triassic proves it. The dinosaurs did not rise because they were the most powerful creatures of their time. They rose because they were the most adaptable, the most efficient, the most resilient, and because, when catastrophe struck twice, they were still standing. If you want to explore more lost worlds, subscribe to Ancient Earth. Next, we go to the Jurassic, when the survivors of the Triassic became giants.